The opposition this week warned that the absence of double taxation agreements with other countries may result in Gibraltar companies being discriminated against. It says there must be a level playing field on taxation matters, otherwise Gibraltar will end up with all the burdens of compliance but none of the benefits. The warning comes after the OECD rated Gibraltar as largely compliant in relation to the exchange of tax information. Last week, the Minister for Financial Services, Albert Isola, criticised the GST for not congratulating the government on this achievement. But the leader of the opposition has accused Mr. Isola of shooting from the hip, reminding him that when Gibraltar was transferred to the OECD's white list in 2009, there was only a muted silence from the GSLP Liberals. Daniel Feetham spoke to Stephen Nish.
Well, I think he's shot from the hip, absolutely. I mean, the point that we make about that is that he has criticised the opposition for us not making any statement about the fact that Gibraltar has been found to be largely compliant in this area by the OECD. But of course, I mean, I'm just simply reminding Mr. Isola, that's all, that in 2009, when Gibraltar was actually whitelisted, was placed in the whitelist, OECD, massive achievement for Gibraltar in 2009, as a consequence of a similar drive, the opposition then, the GSLP Liberals, remained silent. We have absolutely no hesitation in congratulating everybody that's actually been involved in this initiative. We think it's a jolly good initiative for Gibraltar and it's an achievement for Gibraltar. But of course, the main thrust of what we're saying today is that, yes, this international drive, because it's an international drive to provide tax information, not only in relation to Gibraltar, but other jurisdictions as well, it's all very well and good. But we've got to make sure that there is a level playing field. And at the moment, what there is a discrimination from certain jurisdictions in relation to Gibraltar, because Gibraltar does not have double taxation agreements with those jurisdictions. So despite the fact that we are compliant and that we provide information via all these initiatives to, for example, France, because we don't have a double taxation agreement with France, France effectively treats us in a discriminatory way and treats Gibraltar companies and our clients in a discriminatory way. It doesn't, for example, in relation to Malta, because Malta does have a double taxation agreement with France, and it's something that really we need to tackle, and we need to tackle fast.
So are you saying that the government isn't doing enough to enter into double taxation agreements with other jurisdictions?
Well, I don't know what the government is doing. This is a GSLP manifesto commitment. We're now 3 years down the line, and we haven't seen any double taxation agreements. I know that it is problematical. It is problematical for certain companies, and it's been drawn to our attention. The fact that France, Italy is another jurisdiction, that although we are fully compliant and transparent in the information that we provide those jurisdictions, that they, for example, in the case of France, imposes a withholding tax in relation to Gibraltar because there is no double taxation agreement between France and Gibraltar. I mean, I don't know what efforts are being made by the Gibraltar government in this respect, but it's something that's very, very important to the jurisdiction. And what we're saying is that we're willing to work with the government and support the government in that kind of initiative, which we feel would be very worthwhile indeed.
And as regards the OECD rating of largely compliant for Gibraltar, you've congratulated the government on that, and the government has pointed out that this is the same rating that places like Germany and the UK have. But of course there are other countries which have a higher rating of compliance, including Spain, in fact. So how significant is it really for Gibraltar?
Well, I think it is a good achievement for Gibraltar to be largely compliant. We've heard from the government saying that they're going to be working towards a compliant status, and I have no reason to believe that that is not what they're going to be doing. This is really part of an ongoing process that goes back to 2007, 2008. In 2009, the then GSD government managed to get Gibraltar onto the OECD whitelist. So it's part of an ongoing process. Our concern really is that Gibraltar doesn't take the disadvantages of this kind of exchange of information without taking reciprocal benefits, and that we don't have a situation where there is not a level playing field, that jurisdictions like Malta, because they have a double taxation agreement with France, that France does not discriminate against Malta but discriminates against Gibraltar. That's the issue that we're drawing attention to. That is what is important that we focus on. and that we do proceed with trying to enter into double taxation agreements with other jurisdictions, or failing which, that we attempt through all the means possible to actually take a case to these jurisdictions and say, hang on a minute, we are fully compliant with all these initiatives, and what you can't do is discriminate against us.
A criminal trial against Nature Port Reception Facilities, which operates the North Mole Sullage Tank Farm, is ongoing at the Magistrates' Court. Nature is accused of breaching health and safety legislation in the lead-up to the 2011 port explosion. This report is from Thursday's proceedings in court.
Today, industry expert Professor Booth appeared on behalf of Nature and discussed the risk assessment measures that were in place at the time of the port explosion, which killed 40-year-old Pedro Zambrana Lopez. Professor Booth admitted the risk assessment could be improved in relation to explosive atmospheres. He found it extraordinary, however, that Gibraltar has seemingly been able to take an EU directive, chop it in half and put it in 2 different acts. He said what we have is essentially a replica, but with no guidance, and this is an area they scraped through. Stipendiary Magistrate Charles Beatle commented, in Gibraltar it is very much a case that legislation is copied from UK and EU legislation. He added that usually a word in the document will be changed, admitting that this will ultimately change the meaning of the document. Professor Booth recalled how the old risk assessment regulations had been withdrawn 3 years ago and are no longer applicable because the requirements were too demanding. When asked about the events of the day and the bolts used in the Sullage tank's relief vents, Professor Booth said all bolts failed in the big explosion. The trial is set to continue for another week.
The new marine protection regulations mark a move away from the police being the lead enforcement agency for environmental legislation. This is the view expressed by Chief Superintendent Richard Mifsud in an interview recorded for this week's Viewpoint programme. Mr Mifsud said the Department of the Environment is the lead agency, and the Royal Gibraltar Police expects the department, through its wildlife wardens, to take a lead in enforcing the new rules.
We would expect them to take the lead in prosecuting offenders. Hopefully people will comply with the licensing regime, and there will be very little need to enforce. And the police will be there to support them, to facilitate that task. Should they come across individuals who become obstructive, then obviously police officers have the power to arrest those individuals and allow the wildlife wardens to do their jobs. Clearly there may be occasions where the wildlife wardens see that there is a need to arrest an individual. Obviously they haven't got powers of arrest, which is when they would call upon the RGP to assist and exercise the constabulary powers.
Do you think this marks a move away from the way that things have been done in respect of the Nature Protection Act and the enforcement thereof? I think that it's fair to say that the public has looked to the RGP to enforce the Nature Protection Act so far. Does this mark a move away from that, and for what reason?
Well, I can't answer the reason. I think that's a question best posed to government or other legislators. As far as whether it's a move away, it definitely is a move away, but only insofar as the marine protection regulations are concerned. Clearly, we still have a locus in the Nature Protection Act and an enforcement responsibility there. What it does is it provides clarity. Clarity, and it allows people who understand this environment, excuse the pun, to deal with those types of offences. People who will no doubt be trained in a particular field. So what it does is it clarifies who the lead agency is in this regard. But of course, the RGP stands ready to assist and facilitate the role of our new-to-be colleagues in the enforcement world.
Archaeological remains dating back some 700 years were found during the construction of a building in Casemates this week. The remains show evidence of construction and destruction over the centuries, from Spanish to British occupation, providing a record of Gibraltar's history.
The building is situated by Casemates Square, near the bottom of Crutchet's Ramp, one of the oldest districts in Gibraltar, when, during the construction of an office building there, Admiral Bridge Investments Limited found evidence of historical occupation. They worked together with the newly appointed government archaeologist and the Gibraltar Museum to excavate it.
We have found a part of a Spanish house from the 15th and 16th century, most likely, a well and a cistern connecting to it, and then we have a general level of destruction pertaining probably to the 18th century, to one of the sieges, either the 1727 or the Great Siege, and then we have the 19th century British house. And what's interesting is that the British house has maintained the same line as probably the line in the medieval wall, but the medieval foundations are at the bottom, pertaining to the Spanish find, and probably this Spanish house itself would have been on top of an older Moorish or Arab house.
With layers from the British, Spanish and probably also the Moorish occupancy of Gibraltar, the discovery illustrates a small part of the rock's social history.
All these finds are like little bits of a jigsaw puzzle. I know that this analogy has been used many times, but it really is the best one. And every time we do an excavation, no matter how much you think you know what you're going to find, there's always surprises. So it's very important, because otherwise you end up having the big picture, but you don't have any details in the picture. So, you know, the minute you want to find out a little bit more, what were people's lives like? You know, how did they go about their day-to-day? You don't have that information, and it's these kinds of interventions that give us that information.
According to Kevin Lane, the idea is to try and make archaeology an integral part of the planning process.
At the moment, this has been done in an ad hoc manner. We are aiming, the Heritage Ministry is aiming to change this. Part of that change is my role, so that we can try and integrate this within planning. And what I've stated here, and this is a prime example of it, that even at the 11th hour, with the goodwill in this case of the developer, James Ramage and co, it is possible to discover and actually find something out about our own unique heritage. So in future, we hope that we'll be able to anticipate these sort of works, so that it hinders the least possible the developer, and at the same time we manage to record and preserve our heritage, be it in situ, in place, or be it by record, which is what we're doing here.
Although the remains of the original house will now be destroyed, a record of them has been preserved, with a number of pieces of ceramic from across the centuries also set to be restored and kept in the museum.
A day of remembering service personnel killed during conflicts was commemorated last week. Remembrance Sunday was honoured all over the world, and in Gibraltar the service was held at the memorial by the Linewall Road Boulevard.
People lined the streets for the hour-long service. The ceremony was of particular importance this year, as it is the 100th anniversary of the First World War, and it is also 70 years since the D-Day landings. The service took place at the British War Memorial in Linewall Road, where the Governor Sir James Dutton gave a short bid-in honouring all those who have laid down their lives. This was then followed with the firing of the saluting gun and a 2-minute silence.
Their country, whoever they may be and wherever they may lie.
After this began the laying of the wreaths. The wreaths were laid at the base of the British War Memorial. Remembrance Sunday always falls on the second Sunday in November, and although originally solely commemorated the dead of the First World War, it now honours all of those who suffered and died in conflict, and those who mourn them. The Governor and Chairman of the Royal British Legion Gibraltar branch inspected a contingent of veterans before a parade ended the ceremony. As per tradition, the ceremony came to an end with the national anthem, where the public were invited to join in the singing.